Hello, welcome. And thank you for coming. This is such a delight, these dinner talks. Yeah, a lovely speech, sort of, very unpretentious from someone who has a fantastic, different kind of success story to tell. And we just share a beautiful dinner together. We have done this a few times. Some of you have been to these kind of events. And personally, I'm getting a little bit addicted to these kind of things. So I... No, that was not the introduction I was going to.
Nice.
Short, Conscious Business Community is arranging these kind of events. And I'm a volunteer in this community and one of the co-founders. My name is Jonas Freeman. I'm a mindfulness coach and brand strategist and conscious business consultant. And when I chased after success many years ago, I ended up burning out. Anyone else heard about this term, burning out? Okay, so and I encountered a lot of other things in my life, you know, although maybe I ran companies and those things, and things were growing in my life. Bank account, size of the car, size of apartment, size of my wife. No, not but things were growing, you know, more success in my life. And there were other things growing as well, like stress, pressure, those things that I didn't want in my life. Anyone else notice these things? And also, yeah, if I look back, you know, amount of unsustainable results I created as well. So, well, with that burnout, a divorce, and a bankruptcy in one of my international companies, I came to a point of the rock bottom where I had to find a different way to do things. I had to find meaning with working or, yeah, running businesses again. Otherwise, it was not meaningful to even carry on living, I felt. I was lucky enough to find some good teachers, and on the way to find meaningfulness, I questioned absolutely everything. All the success coaches, all the successes within business, marketing, truths and myths, and all these things. And one of the things I questioned was this concept of success that we see in the mainstream consciousness today. And I think there are more than me today that are a bit, over the old kind of success stories that we are used to hear in the concept of business. Well, my name is Jonas. This is how I created 10 millions in 2 years, and I will tell you all the 10 steps on how to achieve the same. Have you heard this? This is like the normal story how you're supposed to tell a success story within the field of business, leadership, and those kind of things. But we in this room, we know might not be success. That guy might have sacrificed all his relationships. He might have created more unsustainable costs for humanity. And there are so many other reasons why this kind of success story and sharing someone else's plan is such a bad idea. Number one, maybe we're unique. Maybe that's not my success. Maybe those 10 steps is not my soul's journey to walk. And maybe if we just copy other people, you know, want the secure path. Oh, how did you make all those money, you know? Maybe I will never have a chance to receive your unique gift to humanity. So there's so many things we can question within the field of business leadership and those kind of things. I've done it, and what we're doing today, and Karin was so, where are you, Karin? Thank you for putting this dinner talk together and inviting Dean for this dinner talk. And what we're looking for is a different kind of success story. And then we want to put the spotlight on that person to share it. This is what the dinner talks is about. Short introduction about conscious business. And now, the Dean. You saw the topic already. This will be somewhat the story of addiction and how to come back or live life after being into that. And I was very inspired by Dean when I came to Bali the first time. He was one of the phenomenas when I came here. I just saw him and I trusted him immediately. And we grew into becoming good friends, I would say. Yeah, thank you.
I would agree.
Okay, just checking. But I have actually never heard the story, so I'm very curious to hear this myself. So, everyone, the Dean.
Thank you, guys. Wow. Thank you, Jonas. Can everyone hear me? I feel like I can't see everyone. If anybody wants to kind of slide up and move in here, if you can't hear me, just maybe do that and I'll raise my voice a little bit, yeah? If you feel like you want to move in here so you can see, that would be awesome as well. Yeah, so tonight I'm going to share a little bit about my story, my journey, how I got into addiction and then how I kind of got out of it, how I turned it around. And so in reflecting on what to talk about, I mean, I'm 53, so it's going to be a long story. Back, my mother had me on, yeah. I just thought I'd pull out some poignant points in my life that I remember made a big difference to getting me into there and then getting me out of that. And I mean, ironically, it does start back with my birth. So I'm a twin, yeah. So I'm born on New Year's Eve. So my parents were at the hospital expecting one child. They had no idea that my mum was having twins. So the doctor came from a New Year's Eve party, delivered my sister, put his jacket on to go back to the party. And the nurse said to him, "Oh, I think there's another baby in here." And my mum said he blasted her. He told her off. "Don't you dare say that in front of the patient, you stupid woman. It's just the placenta." And I was the placenta. Yeah. So I'm the placenta. Yeah. So they had no idea I was there. So they took me home in girls' clothes, yeah, because they had nothing else. And I think that kind of reflected, I mean, in reflecting back on that did play an impact on my life and in a part where, I mean, I came out built like a jockey's whip, you know, like I had no meat on me. My sister was quite big. I was really skinny, scrawny. Obviously, she ate all the food in there. I had no meals. So I kind of lived my life very much like I wasn't a part, you know, like I wasn't okay to take up space. I was always kind of hidden away, tucked away in the corner, never really speaking up for myself. So even if I got to share in a circle, in a group, I'd always like blah, blah, and get it out within a minute and then kind of be finished. And then other people would take 10, 15 minutes to talk about themselves. So this is a real challenge for me. Yeah, I've got half an hour. So that played an impact on my life. And then one of the other poignant moments in my life, I remember when I was a little kid running into the lounge to give my dad a hug and a kiss goodnight. And my twin sister had beaten me to it, so she'd raced in the lounge and she was hugging Dad on his lazy boy chair. And I went into the lounge to give him a hug and he jumped out of his chair and he went, "Whoa, whoa, 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 no, 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 no." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "No, this is what real men do." And he held out his hand and I was like, "I want a hug and a kiss." And he was like, "No, I'm getting too old for that shit now." I was 6 years of age. And so he shook my hand and he said, "This is what real men do." So in my mind, my sister, you know, like was still huggable, was still lovable. So I made this story in my mind that, shit, my dad doesn't love me. He doesn't love me as much as my sister and there's something wrong with me, you know? So this coupled with a lot of other events of, you know, I was very weak. I was very skinny as a kid, had no meat on my bones. I could never put weight on. My mum used to take me to the doctor all the time thinking that I had worms or, you know, the doctor would say, "Leave him alone. He's just kind of fast metabolism," you know? But I kind of bought this into this story that I'm small, I'm weak, I can't take up space, everyone else is strong, you know? So I started to kind of hide away a little bit. I started to gravitate away from my dad. And my dad the same. My dad was very angry, very violent man. He'd fly off the handle at the drop of a hat. So even the good times weren't necessarily good times because I was always scared of when he was going to turn again. Like he could just switch. We'd be having a really fun, happy family moment and then next minute somebody's getting belted or beaten. So I kind of started to gravitate and pull back away from my dad a little bit. Well, a lot actually. I was always really funny as a kid, so I could break the ice. You know, I was the funny kid, and you know, even if Dad was angry, sometimes I could crack a joke, and it would, you know, cut the tension, and he'd forget about why he was so angry. So I learnt to be really funny, but it was like a defense for me, and that later affected me in later life. I just didn't know how to be intimate. I couldn't open up and actually be with people, especially women. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story about that. There's this girl, a girl that I'd loved for so long. I think I was 16, 17 maybe. And she was in a relationship, so I never did anything. We just became really, really good friends. And then she split up with her boyfriend, and she came over to my bedsit one night, and we were like, I was on the bed, she was doing something over on the other side of the bed set. I had a stereo playing, like record player, that's how old I am, yeah? I had a record player with this romantic song playing. And I got up and I went to go to the toilet, and she was in the middle of the room, and we stopped and kind of brushed hands, and I felt this electricity going up, you know, like, and it was this moment that I've been, oh my God, 2 years I've been wanting to do something with this girl, and our hands touched, and we kind of stood closer, and we started to hug, and then we danced, and we started dancing to this slow song, and it was the most, I was like, my heart was racing, I was like, yes, like what I've always wanted, you know. And then the music stopped, and as the music wound, it was the most romantic moment, and then we came together, and just before we went to kiss, I went, hello, just because it was too intense for me, like I had to break the tension. So I'm going, hello darling, and she was like, she got really shitty, you know, like, and I was like, why did I do that? I'd wanted this so much, yeah. So anyway, one of the other, I guess, most poignant parts or things in my life was when I was about 12 years of age. I didn't go through puberty. So I didn't even know I was meant to go through puberty. So I had no idea, like we never had sex talks or any of that. I had no idea. A couple of years earlier, I remember my brother calling me into the bathroom, and which was really strange because he would never let anyone near the bathroom while he was having a bath, you know. I always thought he was just anal. And he was yelling at me, so I went up to the bathroom door, I went, what? And he goes, come in. I went, what? And he goes, come in. So I opened the door, went in, closed the door, looked at him in the bath, and I said, what? And he just goes, like eyeing down to his groin. And I went, what? And he goes, what? And I looked down and I went, fuck! What happened? I felt sorry for him. Like I thought a monster had crawled on him and died. You know, what happened to you? He was right, okay, get out now. I was like, fuck. And then, but I still didn't relate that was meant to happen to me. You know, I just thought, oh, he's just weird, you know. So 12 years of age, I went and stayed at a school friend's house and spent the night there, which was rare because we were a religious family. We weren't usually allowed to hang around with people outside of the church. And after we went out and played and had dinner, and then after dinner we went and, as Mum said, go on guys, go in and have a bath, you know. And back then everyone, you know, like we all bathed together. It was no big deal. Saving water, actually, back then. We had to save water. It's been around for so long. So we went into the bathroom and I remember stripping off. I pulled my pants down. And I heard Peter McIntyre, I heard him laughing. And I looked up to see what he was laughing at, and he was pointing at my groin and he was laughing at me because I hadn't developed at all. I still had the genitals of a little boy, you know, like no pubic hair, no nothing. And I remember like thinking, what's he laughing at? And then he pulled his pants down and he was like my brother. So he'd developed and hair. And I just remember going, fuck, what? You know, like, and then he called his brother into the room, Andrew, and then they both stood there laughing and pointing at my groin and laughing out loud. And I just remember going, fuck, you know, like feeling so broken, feeling, God, that moment like just shattered me. And I remember thinking, how did this happen? What the fuck, what's wrong with me? So from that moment, I remember just like really internalizing, really hating myself, you know, having so much shame and guilt, first of all for not having gone through this, but also for being so naive that I didn't even know I was meant to go through this, you know. So I withdrew into myself. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't feel there was anyone I could talk to. I mean, to be honest, I would have loved to have been able to speak to my dad about it, but my dad wouldn't understand. My dad spent his whole life trying to toughen me up because he thought I was so weak and sensitive, and he didn't like that. So all of 12 years of age, nothing at all. And I would check all the time, you know, to make sure, fuck, is anything going to happen? Is anything going to happen? And this consumed me. Like, I mean, I'm talking years, but I'm every second of every hour, or every minute of every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, I was consumed with this fact that I was different, that I was broken, you know. So all of 12, nothing. All of 13 years of age, nothing. All of 14 years of age, nothing. So I kind of had lost hope after a while and just thinking, fuck, you know, this is never going to happen to me. I remember we were religious, praying to God, you know, come on, you know, do something, you know, I'm not meant to be like this. And thinking if I had enough money, you know, I could go and get an operation or something to get it fixed. But I wouldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't tell anyone, not even my twin sister, who was my best friend, you know. So I just kept to myself, so much shame, so much guilt. And then I would never really like interact with girls so much, but I did meet a girl, Wendy Botha, who we hung out quite a bit, and it took me maybe 6 months, like before we started kissing and falling around a little bit, and then one day we were at her house, and her mum was away at work. She didn't have a dad living at home, so it was just the two of us, and she wanted to go a little bit further and do a little bit more. So I remember kind of letting her and taking my pants down, and she looked at me and she went, "What's wrong with you? What happened there?" And I just made up a story because I used to have eczema on my arms, and I said, "Oh, it's because I get eczema down there. I don't grow hair like everybody else." And she was like, "Oh yeah." And then I remember getting scared and pulling my pants up and saying, "Look, I don't want to do any more." And then I ran home, took off home, feeling really stupid, really embarrassed. And I walked into school, into the class the next day. I remember turning this brass door handle, opening the door to class, and everybody in the class pointing and yelling at me and laughing and calling me bot, meaning like diseased. And then I remember looking at Wendy thinking, how could you, So she told everyone in the class. And I remember Wendy was so bright red, I've never seen anybody go that red. She was so embarrassed. And I knew that she felt bad, like I knew that in a way that was karma, that she felt really bad. But then I was just like, wow. Now everyone in the school knew it. So I used to get down-trowed. People would pull my pants down at school all the time. I'd get bullied in the change rooms. I would always, for swimming, I'd wear my swimming trunks underneath my clothes, so I never had to get changed. Sometimes I'd race home after swimming, get changed at home, and then come back to school because I just didn't want anyone to see me. But eventually, guys would pull my pants down, and they'd, whack me and hit me with towels and laugh and make fun of me, which just played into this whole, I am so different, and I isolated myself even more. I thought about suicide so many times, I just thought I was broken and I was never going to change. So all of 14, nothing, all of 15, nothing, all of 16, nothing. So by this time I just kind of lost hope and I was just super consumed with myself. Yeah. I remember having a bath. I think I was 17 years of age. And I was laying in the bath one day and I looked down to my testicles for a less than regular look because I'd kind of given up. And I remember seeing this black hair one day and I was like, what? God, almost like, what the fuck? Like I'd won lotto, And it was this hair was like, no. This one lonely straggler. And then I remember going, actually, that actually makes sense, something I'll share in a moment. But I remember thinking, don't get too excited because it might not happen. It's just maybe one hair. Anyway, I eventually developed normally, physically, but never ever felt normal, like in terms of my physical self. Even I remember when I was 35 years of age, I remember being in the gym once, and I used to go to the gym regularly, and I remember hiding in the corner of the gym as I got changed and thinking, Dean, what are you doing? But it had affected me and scarred me so much inside that I still felt broken, I still felt different, and it took me so long to get over that and to try and heal that. So as a result of all of this, I started to, and not having a dad in my perception who loved me or, like any male role models in my life, I started to follow alpha males and, and always hang with the badass, I guess, of the community or wherever I was. And when I was in Australia, I got involved with some bikies, and because they were the alpha male, as tough as I thought I could, get. And I tried to be like one of them. I grew a goatee, and I got a tattoo. I just looked like a gay biker. Some of them used to think I was too. They used to say, "Oh, I thought you were gay when I first met you." I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot. I get that a lot. So I tried to kind of be tough and hang around with, like tough guys. So, and then these guys obviously are into drugs, and I tried drugs before, like I'd smoke marijuana every now and then, but it never really agreed with me. I loved the taste and I loved the smell, but I never liked what it did to me. Like marijuana made me super paranoid. I go to a rugby game, if they have a scrum, I think they're talking about me. I was like, whoa, too paranoid. And then when I was overseas, I travelled overseas when I was 21, and I tried, when I got to Germany, I tried cocaine once. And it was just like, whoa, this thing was like, I was suddenly 10 foot high, bulletproof. It was an amazing experience, but I never tried it again. And then until I was hanging around with these bikies, and they used to line up amphetamines all the time at parties. And so I kind of got into this, and some of our parties were like scenes from Scarface. It was like powder everywhere, drugs all over the table, and so I started to snort amphetamines. And what it did for me, like, it suddenly made me feel like I had so much confidence, you know, like it made me feel like, I mean, I started to become the life of the party, and I really started to come out of myself. So for me, it was like this antidote to feeling so small and insecure. I suddenly felt like king shit in a way. So then I started to kind of use more and more, and I started to deal, because they kind of got me into dealing, and I started to deal. And then I started to kind of use a lot of my own supply. Don't get by on your own supply is one of the rules of dealing. And I started to use my own stuff. And I never ever thought I'd use needles, because I've been scared of needles. I hate needles, you know. And I never ever thought I'd use a needle. And I always just say, no, I'm not doing that. That's for junkies. I'll never be a junkie. And then I met this girl once who was into needles. And I don't know why, but she convinced me one day to do it. And I remember actually the day, there was her and a friend, a guy that she'd scored the stuff off. And I remember holding my arm out, and I remember in that moment, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but knowing that there was a part of me feeling like I was selling my soul at that moment, and I did, you know. I remember saying to her, don't give me a small amount, make sure you use a clean needle. I watched them do the needle, and I said to them, give me a little bit, and there's like, they were laughing, going, that's fine, you're going to be okay, we'll give you a tiny little amount, yeah. And then I just turned away, and I felt this prick, and then when I felt the stuff go into my body, and I had this massive rush to the point where I nearly passed out. And I remember saying, you fuckers, you gave me too much, which made them laugh even more, like, because, you know, they were seeing me spinning out. And then after a couple of seconds, I remember this rush, just like massive rush coming over me, and then it was like I'd had a line times 10, you know, like it was like full on. I was like, and then suddenly really, really confident again. So I started to use and shoot up now, and use more, and then I learned how to do it myself, and I started to get by a lot more on my own supply. And then I met another girl, so I left her and I met another girl who had no idea that I was using drugs. She knew that I was, you know, I'd smoke a little bit of pot every now and then, and she knew that I dealt a little bit. She had no idea that I used or that I shot up. And we ended up getting really intimate and getting together and having a relationship. And we were together for 5 years. Sorry, we were together for 18 years. But I was using drugs for the first 3 years without her knowing. So think about the amount of lies that must take, you know, like every lie I told was only as good as the one that preceded it. So my life actually became, I was actually going to call my book A Life of Lies, because I couldn't even remember what was lies and what was truth anymore. I just lied about everything. And, you know, this really started to affect our relationship, but she had no idea, so I would just lie and say I was tired. Why were you up all night? How come you were up all night again? I'm going like, oh, I just couldn't sleep, so I got up and did leather work, you know, and I'd do leather work and play around, and I've actually got a dead leg from doing leather work. I got no feeling between my leg and my ankle, because I was using one night doing my leather work with a scalpel, and I was scraping some leather off, and I dropped the scalpel and I snapped my legs closed to catch it, but the scalpel had landed that way and it went straight into my leg. And I remember just, whoa! And I remember pulling it out so fast and flung it that it stuck in the wall. And it took my mate, he couldn't even get it out of the wall. It took him so long to get it out. But it flung in the wall. And then I'd severed a nerve in my leg. So immediately my leg went numb. And we rushed off to the doctor actually. And the doctor, I remember this doctor just blasting me, because I said to him, I was really scared, you know, like I've got amphetamines in me, he's giving me injections. I said, is it going to interfere? And all he did was give me a blasting, you know, you're an idiot, why would you take amphetamines? And he just lectured me, and I remember just going, what a dick, shut up, you know, just give me what I need to go. And so he booked me in to go and see a specialist, but because I couldn't get into the specialist for 2 months, by the time I got to the specialist, they said they could have repaired it. But now it would be like a 2-year operation. I'd be out of action for 2 years. So I said, don't worry about it. I'll just put up with a dead leg. So that's a good reminder of, you know, like I've got a few reminders of my drug days and what it's done to my body. So my son, my book actually starts, the first chapter is when my son was turned one. But before he was born, I remember saying, I am going to stop using before my son gets born, before my baby gets born. We didn't know what we were having. I said, when my baby's born, I'm not going to be a junkie. He's not going to have a junkie for a dad. So I'll make sure I stop. And I was adamant. I was definitely going to stop. So I remember my wife's in labour. I remember putting her in the car. Wait there, honey. I'm just going to run inside and grab something. Going inside to have another shot while my wife's in labour. My not wife, girlfriend. She's in labour in the car. Running inside to have one last shot. How selfish. But I remember grabbing my pouch, which had all of my like empty wash bags, my spoon, my lighter, everything in the bag, and taking it with us to the hospital. And on the way into the hospital, I dumped it into the bin. And I went, that's it, I'm done, no more. So my son was born, was a kind of a complicated birth. It was a birthing centre, so it was an amazing experience, but I wasn't really present because I was still revving, you know. And the next morning, my partner wanted to sleep and baby was asleep. I said, look, I'll go home, and she wanted to get some new clothes, fresh clothes. I said, I'll go home and get some clothes for us. So on the way home, I stopped in at a friend's house who was also a dealer. His name was Dean, and I said, oh, we just had the baby as a boy, and he was like, oh, wow, man, awesome, congratulations. And he gives me a big bag of white powder of methamphetamines. He goes, here, man, congratulations, that's so awesome. And I remember just taking this bag without even thinking about it, as if it was some, you know, accolade that I'd just achieved something, that I deserved this reward. So I stopped at the chemist on the way home. I got another fit pack, needles, went home and started shooting up again. And then I just went, I'll stop before the baby comes home. Never stopped when the baby came home. And then on my son's first birthday, which is where I start my book, I remember I'm sitting on the toilet of our little rental property, and I've got this needle hanging out of my left arm, and I'm about to pump a huge amount, the most I've ever done, like 0.5 gram into my arm. And I'd already had a few shots that day. It's a special occasion. It's my son's first birthday, yeah? And I remember just thinking, what if I die here? You know, what if this is it? What if this is where it happens and this is where they find me? What if my idle son outside that door, who has no idea what his dad's doing, what if this is what they find? And I mean, that washed over me a moment, that shame and guilt, but I still pumped it into my arm. And outside the door, like my partner's family were all over, everyone was over for this happy occasion. It was like a different world outside there for me, and I was in this toilet shooting up. Nobody had any idea. So I didn't stop then. I continued to use. And then one day, actually after a couple of years, my partner's cousin, Yankee Rek, who was my best friend, who was living with us at the time, he came up to me and he said, Dean, if you don't tell Bev tonight that you're using, I'm going to tell her. And I just remember going, what? No, I'm okay, I'm not using that much, man, I'm fine. And I mean, I had fucking sores all over my face, and I was like, no, I'm fine, I can stop. He's like, no, you can't. I said, I'm fine, man, I'll do it, I'll stop, don't tell her. And he said, no. He said, I'm telling you, if you don't tell her tonight, I'm going to tell her. I remember thinking, you bastard, how could you, how dare you? You know, how could you do that to a mate? And I even said, how can you do that to a mate, your dog, and all of that? This guy saved my life. If he hadn't done that, I would still have carried on using. There's no way. I kept pretending, and in my mind, I was not a junkie. In my mind, I could stop whenever I wanted. I'm fine, I can stop, and that's what I would tell people. The truth is that there's no way I could stop. This thing had a hold of me that I couldn't even grasp. So I told my partner, and I remember looking into her eyes as we sat on the bed, and I remember looking through these crystal blue, beautiful eyes and seeing her soul break. I remember she just burst into tears. Wow. And I remember everything starting to click into place for her about all the questions that she'd asked, you know. I remember feeling so responsible in that moment for breaking another soul, another human being's soul. She said, I think you need to leave. And that was my worst fear, was losing my family. And so I left the house, and I remember walking and crying that night. And I walked the whole night and just bawled my eyes out. And ironically, I didn't even know because it was dark, but I was sitting on the stairs of a church crying. And when I left, we were brought up religious. I left the church when I was 19, and I went, I'm never ever going to fucking let anyone tell me how it is again. And I just closed my mind to anything like spirituality or God or any of that. I totally blocked it out. And so here I am sitting on the stairs of a church, and this pastor for the church turned up. It was about 7 a.m. and he saw me, and we had a little chat, and he said, come inside and have a cup of tea. And then so I was just telling him about my life and what had happened. And then about the bikies that I owed this money to, because I was getting all of my gear on credit now, and then there was no way I could pay them back, so I kept getting more. So the idea was I'd get bulk off them, cut it up, sell that, enough to pay them back and have some for myself. But it got to a point where I was using it all, and then I just didn't even think about the consequences. And these guys are heavy bikers, and he was like, "You got to tell them the truth, mate." And I said, "Fuck, I can't tell them the truth. They'll kill me. These are fucking bikers. You have no idea. They'll kill me." And he said, "You've got to tell them, and you've got to just be honest with everybody. You can't lie anymore." So he gave me a ride home, and he said, "And you've got to just talk to your partner and just be open and honest with her." And that was a concept that was unfathomable to me, to be honest, because my whole life at that point was just a lie. So I went back home, and I remember my partner wasn't home, so I went to bed, crashed out, slept. She came home, woke me up about 2 o'clock and sat on the edge of the bed, and we spoke. And both cried and cried and cried and cried. And I remember her just going, "So is this why? And is this why?" And at that point, I just couldn't even remember, because I'd told so many lies. And I said, "Look, I'm sorry. I have no idea. I can't answer that. I don't know anymore." So she agreed to stay with me. She said, "Look, we'll get through this. I'll stick together. I'll stick with you, and we'll go through this together, as long as you get help." And I said, "Yeah, look, anything. I'll do whatever it takes." And I meant it. I'll do whatever it takes. So we went to a rehab centre and spoke to a counsellor. And I mean, in my mind, I remember just this guy feeling like, I felt like he was just telling me off, and he was like this patriarchal, "What are you doing? You're an idiot," kind of, and giving me a lecture. The truth is, it might not have been that. The truth is, I just might not have been ready to change and to stop or to hear it. So I didn't go back, and I said to Bev, "Look, I can do this on my own. I'll be fine. I'll stop using." And I did, and I stopped using for about 3 months. And then in the meantime, we had decided to go to New Zealand, so just to leave, to get away and have a fresh start. And my brother-in-law in New Zealand said, "Look, I've got a job in construction over here. I'll hook you up with a job." And I thought, sweet, because I was on the dole, I wasn't working. But I mean, everybody I knew and my whole circle of friends, all were using drugs. They were dealers, they were users, they were, I had like so many perceived friends, associates. I'd have a party, maybe 100 people would come. And so it wasn't long before I ran into it again, and somebody offered me some and I took it, and then I just started using again. And then when you start using again, you don't start off at the beginning and gradually move up. I just started where I left off, and I hit it from there. I hit it really hard, and I just started using again, lying to my partner, and it all just happened again. I remember we were saving to go to New Zealand. I used all the money. I just remember, I had a beautiful car, sold the car, used the money to buy drugs. We were staying at a parent's house. I started to steal things. I started to lie and just bullshit everybody in my life just so that I could get this drug. It had such a strong hold on me. At this point, I hated it. I hated the drug. I hated the needle. I hated myself for doing it. I hated the fact that, that I wasn't who I knew I was inside. I knew there was a better man inside. I knew there was someone better than this. So we ended up, the last shot I did have of my life was we went to the Perth airport when we were leaving. And again, I took my pouch with me. I had a shot in the toilet at the Perth airport, had my last shot, and then I ditched the bag and I went, okay, that's it, I'm done. And that was the last shot I had of my life. That was the last time I ever took methamphetamines. But I went to New Zealand, and because there's a thing called transference where you just switch one thing for another, and I just became an alcoholic in New Zealand. So I switched the drugs for alcohol, and then what I did is I colluded my partner in on it. So I'd buy her cans of UDL, cartons of UDL cans, so she could drink with me. And so she kind of did that for a while, and then we had another baby over there, and then she started to, get her shit together and go, look, I don't want to do this anymore, and I still wanted to carry on, so I'd still drink. We'd all go to parties. I'd drag them off to parties, and till all hours of the night, they'd want to go home, and I was that, you're just a killjoy, what's wrong with you? You're always, always trying to drag me down, and, and I want to party, and we're just having a good time. And so I gave her a really hard time. And then on the way home, I'd want to stop and get more. The kids are asleep, and I want to go to the bottle shop. Come on, I just want another drink. And you're just such a party. She's got, I think you've had enough. Don't give me a lecture, So I was just so consumed with myself and getting this stuff into me that I just started to destroy my relationships with her and with my kids. Another poignant moment in my life. Actually, I'll tell you first. So we went to New Zealand. I drank I became an alcoholic for maybe 3 years. We were there for 5, and then I started to swap my addictions. Like I started to realize, look, this is fucking our life, and you know, like it's not doing any good for any of us. So I started to become, started going to the gym, and started to like get into some personal development and swap my addictions for good, better class addictions. But even though I was going to the gym 7 days a week and I had the most ripped body, muscular body I've ever had in my life, I never ever felt right inside. I still felt like that broken little kid. So I was still addicted. I became addicted to the gym, which started to affect my relationship because I'd have to be at the gym 7 days a week, and I still couldn't open up and be intimate with my partner. When my son was 9 years of age, I remember grabbing him by the throat up against the wall, and I was so angry and ready to punch him in the face. And I remember thinking, what the fuck? How did I get to this? And I'd spent my whole life saying, I will never be like my dad. I will never, ever, ever be like my dad. And in that moment, I realized that I'd turned into my dad. You know, this violent, fucking angry man. And I was angry. I had no idea why I was angry, but I was angry that I was angry. So it just kind of got worse and worse and worse. So in that moment, I realized, I've got to do something here. This isn't right, you know. So I started to go off and get some help, and I started to I did some anger management courses. I did some counselling and started to see a psychologist, and I ended up actually I did this weekend workshop which absolutely changed my life. Like I did this process with this guy where it was like he opened my eyes to life for the first time. And it shifted absolutely everything for me. Like from that moment on, I remember when I got it, I was laughing and crying simultaneously. He said to me in the beginning before the workshop, he said, your problem is you just don't get your dad. You don't get how much your dad loved you. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You have no idea, mate. My dad was an arsehole. He fucking beat us. He beat my mum black and blue. He was violent. He was angry. You don't know what you're talking about. He said, no, you just got no idea. And then when he took me through this process, I mean, I remember laughing and crying simultaneously. I was laughing because it was so stupid. I'd made this whole story up about my dad that was a lie. And I was crying because I'd made this whole story up. You know, I was crying because I became a junkie, an alcoholic, a shit father, a shit partner, because of this one little story that was a lie. When my son was 12 years of age, my ex-partner came up to me and said, Dean, I think you need to go and talk to your son. When my son was born, actually, I'll just say, when he was born, in my mind I was pleading and praying to God, please let him be born normal. Please let my son be born with a big dick, you know. And when he was born like really well endowed. He was like, he had a big, and everyone used to comment on it. And every time they commented, like a part of me was like, awesome, you know. Fucking crazy. I'd see him with the other kids and they'd go, oh, look at, you know, he's so fucking huge. And I'd go, oh, yeah, I know. Fucked up. Anyway, so my partner said, you need to go and talk to your son. And I said, why? What's wrong? And she said, he's not going through puberty. I remember my world fucking shattering in that moment. I remember thinking, oh, I've fucking broken my son as well, you know? I remember feeling so bad for him. So I took him out into the granny flat and I sat down with my son, and for the first time in my life I cried in front of somebody else. And I said to my son, fuck, I'm sorry, buddy. You know, like I feel this is my fault. I feel like I'm the cause of this. And I told him my story, which he had no idea about. I'd never told him, never told anyone about it. And I remember crying in that moment, and my son crying, and then I talked to him about what's going on for him, and, you know, is he thinking about suicide and all of the things that I was thinking about? And he said, yeah. And I remember saying to him, I can't fix you, but all I can do is let you know that you're a man on the inside way before you're a man on the outside. And it'll happen, I promise you it'll happen, you'll go through it. It might just take a while for you, you know? And then I remember in that moment feeling so grateful, because when I was going through it, the one thing that I would have most wanted in my whole life was to be able to talk to somebody about it, especially to talk to my dad about it, and I couldn't do that. But I got to do that with my son, and I wouldn't change that in a heartbeat. I remember feeling so grateful that I could do that with my boy and talk to him about suicide and talk to him about what he was going through. And for the first time in my life, feeling grateful about what I went through. And then I ended up realizing I'd gone through all of this for a reason. You know, like I remember thinking, actually, and somebody saying to me, you've got to do something with this, Dean. And so I went to this rehab center thinking, I went through this for a reason, I want to find out why. So I went through the rehab center, and even though I was stopped using, I wasn't using anymore, I was still drinking occasionally, but not really much anymore. And I wanted to find out, you know, why I'd gone through this. And I did this program, and it really gave me an answer, you know, like the reason how I got into it and why, and made so much sense to me that I stayed there, did some training with them. I found that I was really, really good. I ended up working groups, running men's circles, partners, parents programs, and I was really good just because of my experience. I remember sitting in the training the first time, and there were these people with degrees and double degrees and psychs, and I remember feeling so out of place and saying to them, fuck, I feel like I'm, you know, like I'm so outranked here and I'm out of place. And I remember them saying to me, Dean, you've got one thing that none of us could ever have. You've got that experience, you know. So I discovered I was actually really good at actually working with people and facilitating the groups, and my group started to be the busiest, and, you know, people started to love what I did, and my sessions I started to book out. But I also realized there was a stuckness in people, like even, you know, they might get off the drug or the alcohol so they'd stop, but then they'd get stuck in recovery, and you know, like they didn't know how to get out of that, so they had to keep coming back or they'd fall off the wagon. So I realized, and even for me, you know, like until I did this workshop, which got to the core of the addiction for me, it got to the core of, you know, like I was looking for Dad's love. I was trying to fill that through drugs, through alcohol, through sex, porn, everything else. It was because I had something missing inside of me. So I left the rehab centre and I started off on my own and actually doing this process that I learnt. After I experienced this life-changing stuff, I stayed with these guys and I just learnt what they did. I hung around them like a fly on a bagel. You know, I just wanted to learn everything I could because it was so amazing. I set up tea and coffee, set up all the rooms for them. You know, I just did every event that they had, and I got really, really good at this quantum physics, quantum mechanics work that they do. So I left and I set up my own practice, and I really loved it. I started to really enjoy it and work more holistically with people and actually realize, you know, that we're sentient beings. You know, there's so much more that I wasn't sharing with people. And then I had no idea. I had still a lot of healing to do. And when I came to Bali like 6 years ago, I came here thinking I was just going to continue doing the work that I was doing there, opening hearts. I had a good name in Australia. I was running workshops all around Australia. A lot of people knew who I was. So I thought I'd just come here and I'd be doing the same thing. And when I turned up in Bali, nobody knew who I was. And I'd tell people what I did and they'd just go, so? And everyone else was like, fuck! So nobody gave a fuck about what I did. They wanted to know who I was. And then so for the first year, I remember just being raw. I had no idea who I was outside of my work, who I was, what my voice was, you know, what I stood for, who I was outside of being a dad. I had no idea. So I remember sitting in Alchemy actually one day. This guy, Hunter, amazing astrologist here, and he sat across from me and he looked up and kind of just said hi, and he goes, how you going? I said, yeah, I'm okay, yeah, how you going? And small chat, and he said, oh, what do you do? And I kind of told him, and he was like, oh, yeah, okay, and then kind of just went back to what he was doing. And then I remember looking up and going, actually, you know what, mate? And he said, what? And I burst into tears, and I just said, I'm not doing very good at all. I'm fucking struggling. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Nobody knows I'm here. I don't know what the fuck's going on. And he just dropped his shit and said, thanks, man. He said, now I feel like I can have a conversation with you. And I learnt that I could actually start to be vulnerable and start to be real and start to share. And I did some meditation courses and lots of breath work. And even though the process that I'd done helped me heal that core wound, you know, I still had to discover who I am and discover what I'm about. I have no idea still, by the way, but in a good way. I realized one day I have no idea, but I kind of love it because I don't want to label myself and box myself into anything. I love the fact that I just get to do what I do now, and what I do now and the sessions I do with people, I love it, and it makes such a big difference in their life, and it kind of clears, like it's like 20 years of therapy in one session. It clears all of this childhood trauma, but I get to love what I do and now do what I love. And then I recently created an online addiction program. So when I was working in the rehab centre in Australia, I remember getting a phone call from the mining company, and they wanted to send some guys down, and I said, look, why don't we come up to you, or at least maybe we could do something online. He said, bro, if you could do that, that would be amazing. And I talked to my supervisor, and they said, no, it's not in our business plan, we can't do that. And I said, it's a mining company, they've got so much money, why don't we set it up? And they said, no, we're not going to do that. So I remember thinking, I'm going to write a program that can help these people who can't access our help. So I wrote back then it was a 12-week program, like not 12-step, but 12-week, of all the best stuff that I learned in the rehab centre, but then also all of this other quantum physics, quantum mechanics, to get people to really understand where their addiction comes from and what addiction's about. And it's more like a life skills program, like how to set boundaries, how to raise your level of self-esteem, how to take responsibility in each area of our life, how to let go of shame, guilt, all of that kind of stuff. So now it's a 16-week program, so I've revamped it. It's a 16-week online program for addicts. And then I recently created a 12-week online program for people who are looking after people with addiction, because I realized that, parents and partners and siblings, what we do out of love when we're trying to get somebody to stop actually pushes them further into the addiction. It enables them. So this program is all about how not to do that, how not to enable the person. And I recognize, as much as she didn't want to or realize how much my partner had enabled me, whereas when, the time when she said, no more, like when we were drinking, no more, I'm done, then, it gave me a boundary, a really set boundary with consequence. So I stopped, So it's all about how not to do that. And I haven't actually launched that program yet, but I've had someone, because they found it on my website, a lady who just took the first module. So there's like 4 modules. She took the first module, which is 3 lessons, and sent me a message and said, oh my God, thank you so much, this changed my life. I had no idea how much I was enabling my husband. He was drinking, he was he was abusive, he was getting violent with me and the kids, and she said I had to leave him to change things, but now I've got an amazing life, my kids are safe. And I remember thinking, that's what it's about, for me. I wrote a book called Shoot Up, and the intention, I'm not a writer in my mind. I wrote this book thinking no one's even going to want to read my book, But then I thought, if I can help one person, one other soul, to not go through what I went through, or to help them in some way, that's why I'm writing this book. So I edited it and re-edited it like 20 times. And sometimes I'd edit things out, like because of my not going through puberty, I used to stuff things down my pants to make me think I'd look bigger, and then so when I was writing, I wrote all that in my book, and I was like, no, they don't need to know that. So no, they don't need to know that. And then I went, no, they have to know everything, because if I left that one thing out and someone was going through that, how dare I? How dare I leave that out? So the book was all about, it's a tell-all, all about my life, as much as I could be honest and live my life like it's on the front page of a newspaper. Yeah. I think that's about it. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Let me serve dinner in 5 minutes.
That's not a question.
So we have
That's
5
not a
minutes.
question.
5 minutes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Nice. 5 minutes for questions. Anything at all. How long do you stay warm if you pee in a wetsuit? I don't know.
I have a question. What was the process of writing like?
Process of writing, a great question, was really cathartic for me. Even after like 20 times of re-editing it, I'd be reading stories and I would cry and cry and cry. And I had no idea, like even writing this, I had no idea what I'd been through. Like even, because it was just me experiencing my life. And then as I'm writing these stories in my book, I'm like, Dean, that's kidnapping. So I was involved with these bikers who were kidnapping people and guns in people's mouths and like serious shit. And to me, it was just me and a few mates collecting debts. I didn't even think that it was anything, but as I'm writing the story and I'm like, and the things that I've done to people in there, especially like what I've done to my partner and my ex-partner and my kids, and and the journey that I put them on as a result of my use. I'm blessed that I've healed that now. I've done enough work to be able to heal that relationship with my kids and with my ex-partner. We're actually friends now, which is amazing. One of the hardest things for me to do actually was to leave my ex-partner, because I broke her heart, yes, let alone that time, but a few other times. I got to a point in my life where I said, I don't want any more lies in my life. I've had enough of lies. I want to be 100% honest. So I had to tell my partner, after I'd told her about the drugs, I told her that I'd cheated in the relationship, early on in the relationship. Even though she would never have found out, it was like 10 years on. I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. I don't want any more lies. And again, I remember breaking her heart. Like the one thing that we always said we would never do to each other. And I'd done it the whole time anyway. So I remember when it came, like I knew I couldn't be in the relationship anymore. We were fighting all the time and we were struggling, and I knew she wasn't happy and I knew I wasn't happy, but I was like, how dare I? I can't leave her after all the times she's forgiven me. I can't leave this woman. And so I stayed 5 years knowing I was miserable, knowing she was miserable, got couples counselling, did like lots of PD work until it got to a point where I knew I couldn't stay for her and for me. And then I left. It was one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life. Yeah, great question.
I was wondering, do you still crave any of the stuff you were addicted to?
Great question. I don't. I remember when I went back to New Zealand and I was so when I stopped cold turkey, I had withdrawals and massive withdrawals, sweating all the time. I woke up like crying every night for about 3 years. Like it took 3 years to get this out of my system, but I'd wake up crying because I dreamed that I'd shot up again. And in the dream, it was so real that I had so much shame and so much guilt. And I'd wake up bawling my eyes out, and my ex-partner would wake up and go, what? And I'd just go, I just dreamed again, and I remember that feeling of that guilt and shame and that horrible feeling that stopped me from ever wanting to go back to it. And then one day my sister in New Zealand had scored some amphetamines, and I went to her house and she was like, oh Dean, look at this, what do you think? And I remember grabbing the bag, flicking it, it was like yellow crystals, and I went, that looks like real shit, that's ephedrine, But in no moment did I think about wanting to taste it, open it, smell it, or want to use it. I just gave it back to her, and in that moment I knew I was done. I was like, oh fuck, I'm done with that. Drinking, I can drink now if I want. I've sorted out the addiction now, so I don't drink anymore. I don't believe once an addict, always an addict. I'm not an addict anymore. And I don't believe in standing up and affirming for the rest of my life that I'm an addict. I think it's a silly affirmation. Hi, my name's Dean, I'm an alcoholic. No way. For a period of time, I think that's really, really helpful. I think we need to do that, to declare it, but then not to keep that affirmation going. So I've tried to drink. My birthday's on New Year's Eve. I've tried to have a few drinks on New Year's Eve to be party with everyone else, and I just don't like it. I don't like me when I do that. I love who I am. I love me. I love being able to have a conversation with someone, to be real, to drive home afterwards, to not to feel sick for the next 3 days and rob me of my life. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, dinner?
Can we have a dinner break?
We can have a dinner break.
Have you made some space here?
Thanks, guys. Thank you, brother. Yeah.
So,
Thanks for coming too. Nice to see so many people. It's amazing.
I would like to ask you guys just one question. Did it make any kind of sense to have these kind of talks in the context of business, or if I put it in a different way, how we share value with other human beings?
Yes.
Did it make any sense? Because I was a bit worried that, In which way?
Well, share value with other beings. I mean, the value Dean shared with me makes me want to work. I mean, you work with me, basically. I need you, and your business is well, of course. In this way, it's valuable for me and for him.
And I think it's real. Like it's a real experience, a real person sharing their experiences. So people connect with the realness and authenticity rather than business is like business. This is real stuff.
Do you think that Dean shares value with humanity today?
Yeah.
Enormous, yeah? Very valuable things,
It
yeah.
takes a massive pair of hairy balls to share that, and I think it's even take an even bigger heart to share, an even bigger spirit to share like you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
This is more value than any millions of big cars or shiny stuff. This is the real shiny stuff.
Yes.
I like that.
So in the spirit of Dean, I invite you all to just be absolutely yourself, authentic, and enjoy a good dinner together, chatting, being